What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10X Recruiting brought to you by Menaview. We got the CEO in the building. What's up, Sile?
What's up? You good?
I'm good, baby. I'm good. Let's do this. So today on the pod, we had Amber Weinberg on, who is the founder of Aperture Partners. Sile, what were your takeaways from this episode?
My biggest delight in hearing in this episode was Amber talking about the lack of a scorecard. It's a bit more nuanced than that, but I think really the point she's making is, I think if you start with the scorecard, that's just one route. You can find yourself just listing out some attributes. That could be the thing that results in the outcome you want. Whereas actually, if you just start by defining the outcome that you want, what do you want this person to do? And then almost use the process to help you understand what are the various different sort of shapes of people that might be able to help us get there, which I totally agree with. And I think it's almost helped me understand one of the things that maybe I don't do so well when I'm working with recruiters on a role, which is I basically want to represent that view. Like, I think there are numerous flavors. I think there's numerous ways we can win. Someone in this seat can win. This is the thing they need to win. That's not up for debate, but I'm not going to be sort of dogmatic about they have to have X, Y, Z, because it doesn't help anyone. It just helps you feel like you've done your job of putting the right people in front of me, when actually it's obviously these intangibles and the sort of like the special mix of some of these different things that matters. So I love that insight.
It's so funny because it's also my biggest learning from the pod is that Amber does not believe in scorecards. And I don't know if I agree. I see the angle, and I've certainly experienced the hiring manager who's like, well, we have a list of 14 things and they don't check 13 and 14. Like, we got to keep going back out to market. And I think that's what she's defending against. But I've also worked with so many hiring managers who like get warped by the candidate and aren't thinking about like the role. And so going back to the mock, which stands for missions, outcomes, competencies, it's written by Jeff Stump. It's like this famous Andreessen post from like 15 years ago. I think the mock is actually a very helpful scorecard thing, and aligning people, especially not just the CEO, but the rest of the team. Like, if we don't have some sort of like codified thing, how do we get everybody on board? And I think she presents a very good case for why the scorecard is completely overrated. But it's like one of those things to where in recruiting, it reminds you there's not one way to do it. There's multiple ways to like skin the cat.
Yeah.
And I actually really like Amber's style, and I learned a lot from her in this episode. So with that, I hope you guys enjoy this episode with Amber Weinberg. Here she is.
All right, Amber. So you had a hot take in our prep call around, you said something along the lines of like, candidate stories are so bad and nobody knows how to tell them. What does that mean?
It's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked this. So in recruiting go-to-market leaders for the past nearly 15 years, you would think, one would imagine, that sales and marketing leaders would be the best at telling their story.
100%.
You think, okay, if anyone can tell their story well, it would be a sales and marketing leader. What I found is that so often what happens is that executives go into an interview process and they talk about all of the things that they did along the way. That's natural. You want to tell your story. You want to talk about the metrics, the revenue that you pushed forward in a business. You want to talk about the different messaging and positioning that you brought to market, your launches if you're a marketing leader, your product launches. The thing that people miss the opportunity to do is actually contextualize why it matters, big picture in the world. So when me as a recruiting leader, even being able to position your story effectively, I need to be able to have the context to be able to effectively draw analogies to what's happening within a business at any given time. And especially as we move towards a moment where like the playbook of the past is not going to be the playbook of the future, drawing analogies becomes the most important thing. And it's up to you as a storyteller of your own story to be able to create that analogy on behalf of your audience. So one way I think about telling a story is asking your audience, like, hey, how much do you know about this moment in time when Salesforce was coming to market? Do they know that Salesforce was aggressively really coming to market, trying to take this market opportunity in CRM that they saw? We're so far past that at this point that your audience most likely doesn't know how to draw that comparison. What then had to happen in order for us to move the ball forward to capture that market? That part of the story is missed 99% of the time. And then fast forward and multiply that across your entire experience. And that way, the person who's listening on the other end can start to draw the analogies of why the opportunity that you're interviewing for might be a fit for you and start to pattern match on your behalf. So without that broader context, you're really just like talking about the ticky-tacky of what you've done inside an organization. Then you can translate and say, okay, now that you understand why this matters in the world big picture, what specifically did you do to move the ball forward? Okay, great. Now I do want to hear about your metrics. Now I do want to hear about the specific impact that you had at the company while you were there. But without that context, it doesn't mean much.
So then give me feedback on my pitch. So here's mine.
Okay.
I was employee 50 at DoorDash, first recruiter, first HR hire, scaled to 800 employees, left to join Carta as the chief people officer, was there from 200 to 1200, founded my own venture-backed tech company. We were building a talent marketplace, raised 15 million over 2 rounds. What am I missing there? Like, how should I make that more applicable for companies that I'm interviewing with?
Well, Nolan, like I know what DoorDash is because I order food for my family on days when I'm really busy. But like, what moment was DoorDash in when you came from a competitive perspective? What did the market look like? Did you have to educate the market on a new behavior and way of doing things? Like, what was the moment? Why did it make it such that acquiring talent into DoorDash? What was the unique story that you had to tell in order to effectively recruit the best people to the table? So let's start there, and then we can dive into the specifics of the company building that you helped to do. But that context is really the thing that was missing in your story.
Yeah, because you're exactly right. So like what people forget, given that DoorDash is now a verb, is that back in 2015, Uber had more money than God. Travis Kalanick was the best founder on planet Earth and the most intense person probably on planet Earth. And every single candidate that we were talking to, one was like, Web Vannon back in 2000 died. Like, this thing's going to die. You're never going to figure out the unit economics. And then 2, if anyone's going to figure it out, it's going to be Uber. They already have all of the drivers, which they can just repartition as dashers. It's going to be too expensive for you guys. That's actually super helpful, right? Because it's like we were the underdogs at that time.
Yeah.
And now we're the winners, which is what really resonates with people. It's like the underdog story for me.
Absolutely. So to take this a step further, one additional thing that you might add is Tony is a very specific person to hire for as well, in the best way. Like, hired an amazing team. But the point is that you are working with a founder who had a very specific lens in mind around what it meant to hire great people onto the team. And so one of the things I'm imagining, this is me like thinking through how I might tell your story if I was working with a client of mine, but you're in this moment where you're like, hey, how do I actually get to the heart of what this person cares about and do so in a way that I can then operationalize across the entire company? How do we get to the heart of that so that we can build a recruiting strategy? And that's what people, especially right now, care about. So if you think about like the hottest companies in the world, that founder dynamic right now and actually getting to the heart of what's going to work for the founders and CEOs that are here in this market, like that is something that you should not be missing if you are any type of leader, contextualizing for your audience what you've done.
That's super helpful. Thank you for the constructive feedback. You're exactly right.
I want to add one more example of this. So one of my favorite stories to tell right now is when I'm thinking about considering people from Snowflake or Databricks or both. Ideally, you're considering both. What's interesting is that Snowflake came to market, they educated the market, they sort of set the tone, and then the flywheel started going forward and people started selling really effectively. What was interesting about Databricks, and if I was an executive at Databricks, I'd be pounding the table, especially if you're like the product marketing leader, the marketing leader. This is the story that I would be telling, which is that we came to market in a moment where we knew that AI was going to be a thing really soon. They were telling the AI story and gaining the credibility about the AI story and why data mattered in that bigger picture way before Snowflake even thought to tell that story. And then Snowflake tried to catch up. But if you're thinking about the go-to-market team and hiring for the go-to-market team specifically, and even the product team, how you have to work together in order to make that happen, to effectively like put the pieces in place, play chess, so that ultimately you'll win the market when you know this downstream thing is going to happen. Those are the types of things that, more broadly speaking, candidates should be telling in their story that just, again, so often are missed.
Yeah, like we forget that actually what humans really want to hear in storytelling is like the hero journey, right? Like
Yeah.
they want to hear of like how hard it was and like
Yes.
all the shit that you had to go through. And it's really easy to kind of just skim past that because you lived it and you're like, oh, like, and you get it, right? Like, we just skip past it because everybody knows, but actually nobody knows. Cause like when you talk about Databricks for me, like, oh,
Yeah.
like they were picked a winner from like basically Series A. Like they
Yeah.
had like an easy road. And in fact, like to your point, they were playing chess. Like I didn't know that part of the strategy. And so I think you have to always be educating people on like the unique moments at a stop. Because
Yeah.
I actually now I'm at this point now to where when I see people who have only had like mega companies on their resume, I walk in very skeptical because like, oh,
Definitely.
it's like if you were at Figma 3 years ago and doing a sales role, like you were selling ice to Eskimos. Like that's not hard. Like everybody was doing that. And so in fact, I think it's a way for you to stand out, especially if you don't have like these like very well-known brands on your resume for how actually you're a better fit in this moment, given how hard it is to do basically anything now.
I think your point about the hero's journey is right, that people want to understand what was hard about the thing that you came in and actually accomplished. So, for example, when I'm working with my clients and they come to me and they say, Amber, I want someone from Datadog. I'm like, yeah, of course you do. But why? Why do you want somebody from Datadog? Help me unpack and understand what is hard and what is analogous about this hard moment that you're in as a company and why Datadog and someone who's been through the journey at Datadog is the right person for you in this moment. And it might indeed be the case that the person from Datadog is the right person in that moment, but understanding that and pushing my clients to understand what is hard about the moment that you're in. And instead of going out and creating a candidate universe that is your usual suspects, which is more and more becoming commoditized, like this is going to be a part of our job as recruiters that is agentified and straightforward. Moving forward, the list creation, the list generation, how we can differentiate is what is hard about the job and how can I create an analogous universe of candidates with that question at the center versus you're selling to a developer audience. So therefore I'm going to go find all of the usual suspects of developer companies. It needs to be that, and it needs to be this other thing around finding the analogy and then building a candidate universe from there.
Yeah. What's the Peter Thiel thing, which is finding the undiscovered talent? Like that's actually like, that's where the real art is. Like anybody can go, with the Halo resumes and it's like, that's like not actually recruiting in my mind.
I completely agree. Completely.
So I think one of the aspects with executive search that is under discussed is culture and chemistry. Like being able to work with the founder, like being able to like actually like be in the trenches with the team when it's going through a hard moment. Like they have so many options. They can press the eject button at any point in time. And so like, how do you figure that thing? How do you go about like the process of figuring out if like this human being is going to be good inside of this company?
This is $1 million question. And I think it's the best question for this moment in time is understanding how somebody needs to be culturally wired in order to be effective in this moment. The way that we do that at Aperture is we immerse ourselves in the company in a really deep way. Gone are the days of like recruiters going and saying, hey, just give me the pitch. Okay, tell me your culture. Tell me the culture of your company. What should I know? You're like, oh, look at the website. We have our cultural attributes listed on the website. It's amazing. You should definitely look at it. Those days are gone. You have to immerse yourself in the company to understand what is the cultural wiring of the founder. And when I say cultural wiring, what are they worried about on a day-to-day basis? What makes them tick? When you think about the vision of what they're trying to go after, what specifically are those things and why are they prioritizing those things? Okay, so now we know how the founder is culturally wired because we've sat down and we've understood their working cadence. We've understood that this person's calling me at 5:45 in the morning and I'm going to take the call. I'm going to go downstairs in my slippers and take the call. It's going to happen. But now I know that this is the working cadence of this specific person. And then really doing that times 10 across the company, and you start to pattern match and you start to see how the pieces of the puzzle work together. How do the employees talk about the founder? Are they telling you just the elevator pitch, or do they feel comfortable enough to say like, hey, here's what's actually happening on the team right now? And I think there's an interesting thing that's happening within the most important AI companies right now, which is that you have this balance of tactics, aggressive tactics that need to be used in order to get something done and push the ball forward in a company that doesn't have a lot of infrastructure in place. And you have this massive, big picture strategic vision that we're going after in a market that's ever changing. And so when I think about cultural wiring, I actually think of not what is the company culture, but how does this person need to be wired as a human being in this moment to meet the moment of this company. And so again, we really immerse ourselves in like deep interviews with the team in order to understand what the cultural wiring is right now and what we aspire to be into the future, so that we can map that to somebody who can meet this unique moment and like split the baby enough to be both things. They can be kind of what we aspire to be, and they have enough of the cultural wiring of how the systems work right now to be able to effectively meet this moment.
Let's take a step into those tactics. So say like I'm lucky enough to work with you on my Series C super sexy AI company, and you're going to hire my head to go to market. So we sign the docs. I turn over, like my firstborn child to you. And what is the next, like, how do you do that? How do you figure those things out? Like, so you said meeting with the team, like, what does that look like? What are you asking those people? And then what is the process? Like, walk me through the thing.
So the thing is that I want to first meet with the founder or whoever this person's going to be reporting to, which in this case would most likely be the founder and CEO. I want to meet with them, and then I want to really push them to understand who makes decisions with you. And maybe that's their co-founder, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's actually a board member. Maybe it's the chief people officer who happened to be along the journey, or not even chief people officer.
Definitely not that person.
A chief of staff, somebody along the way who is their confidant. And I want to know who that person is. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, it's to then interview those people and to understand from their perspective and to triangulate the point of view on, again, what's that cultural wiring? How does this person need to show up on day one to be successful? You need to hear it in a multitude of different ways to truly understand it. And it's not, so say, for example, somebody came to me and they said, Amber is this way in terms of working style. The person who's actually best suited to tell you my working style and who's going to work best with me is actually my co-founder. And she's going to tell it to you in one way. And then you're going to go to an employee on my team, Jordy, who I work really closely with, and he's going to tell you, he's going to give you a different perspective. And so I think it's the triangulation of perspectives in order to understand that cultural wiring that's really going to allow you to understand who the right person is for the moment.
Yeah, I like figuring out like who the confidant is. That's a really good frame on it. And then are you asking like, so when you're in these conversations, what I've been asking that's been effective is tell me about the behaviors of your most successful employees. Because that's like, as opposed to like projecting what they want, which humans are generally like pretty bad at, we're really good at like identifying things we've already had and then saying what's good about those things. Because then the next question is what's not good about those things. So it's like, tell me about like the last person who was in this job and why didn't they work? And it gets like very specific about those. Are those the types of questions you're asking?
Yes, those types of questions. And also I like to ask like pretty heavy hitting, uncomfortable questions. So I'll be like, what's the thing that you're most afraid of on your team from a behavior perspective? What keeps you up at night as a founder? What are the things that you're thinking about as you're going to bed at night? Like, what's your last thought before you go to bed at night? And it pushes people to be like, oh, that was kind of a weird question, but I'm thinking about it now. I'm thinking about the type of people I want to surround myself with. I'll also ask the people when I'm triangulating, I'll say, well, like, what is so-and-so afraid of? And they'll say like, oh, that's an interesting question. And it brings up more than you would traditionally get from, like using a past hire or otherwise in order to get the answer.
I'm stealing that. Like, what are you afraid of is such a good question. Like, you have to have a level of like trust, I assume, though, with the person to like really like give you the honest answer. How do you quickly establish that trust?
I think like with me, it's like what you see is what you get. In some ways, like a therapist, I dive into the personal stuff right away, whether you like it or not, and disarm people in that way. I think especially in recruiting right now, there's a way to overcomplicate it. There's a way to systematize it too much. There's a way to professionalize it too much. And what happens in those cases is you actually miss the meat of what is your client afraid of? And I think that my whole approach is simplicity is best. And actually, what you're really dealing with at the end of the day is you're dealing with a CEO and founder who's really afraid they're going to make the wrong hire. That oftentimes isn't actually tied to money. So the quicker that you can get to the heart of what you're actually dealing with and what the people around you are afraid of, the more successful outcome that you're ultimately going to.
Okay. So you have these conversations, and then what are you doing? I think you putting together like a scorecard for everyone to operate off.
I'm definitely not putting together a scorecard.
Okay, say more. Say that's contrarian.
I am a firm believer in not using a scorecard in the process. And the reason why is I believe that a scorecard is specifically designed to minimize weaknesses in a hire and move away from hiring for strength. And so what I'm doing when I'm hiring is I'm saying, what are the 3 things you care about? Do not give me a laundry list. I don't want to hear your laundry list. I want to hear about the 3 things you care about. If this is a success, what are the 3 things this person absolutely has to get done, or it's not a success? And then I'm working backwards from there. I'll contradict myself a little bit here in that we are being very rigid about how we assess those specific things that the company cares about, in terms of how we're getting to the heart of how someone's going to do these things through a situational interview with the candidate. And then we're triangulating and we're saying, okay, on 1, how do they do 1? How do they do 2? How do they do 3? But we're not saying, hey, let's look at these like 5 to 10 different elements that this candidate, from an experience perspective and ability perspective, that they might rank on. And then we're sort of looking at the number at the end saying, okay, well, this person's an 8, this person's a 10. We must hire the 10. They have all the things. It's like, well, how are they actually going to approach the things that actually matter for you in this moment? And that's, I think, that's the approach that we tend to take that I think leads to better outcomes over time.
Yeah, like I like the boiling it down to like 3 things, because like you can, I mean, for every role, you can get to this like laundry list, and then you're like, well, what matters? And then like how like 10 is like, if they don't have 10, are we like a no hire here? Or can they grow into that skill set? Like, I think that is like one of the big traps. The other piece though on triangulating is, I assume you guys are doing like pretty heavy references and back channels after like this person. So talk me through your strategy on back channeling specifically.
It's absolutely necessary. You have to back channel. And I think my clients would say that I'm probably the most comprehensive back channel referencer out there.
Why?
To an extent. So here's why. 1, you have to reference until you stop learning. And you have to understand what someone is bringing to the table. And you have to understand the full picture of what they're not bringing to the table. And that is going to directly inform who you are going to hire as their number 2, which you're going to hire a number 2. So who's that person going to be, and how are they going to round out this person? So that's number 1. So you do have to back channel reference. Here's where back channel referencing goes wrong. If you've done your job well building relationships with candidates over time, and you've been not transactional, and you've prioritized top candidates and getting to know top candidates, when they come on the market, my goal is 2 things in my life. 1, be a good mom. 2, is to get a 10 out of 10 from every single client who ever works with me. If I've not done that, it's a failure point. 3 is I want to be the first call someone makes when they decide they might be thinking about making a move. And that's going to give you proprietary access to candidates that aren't getting reached out, or that are getting reached out to by everybody and anybody under the sun. But they're coming to you because they're like, oh, when I talk to Amber, she's going to actually help me on a broader level, figure out how to navigate this market, figure out what I actually want to do next. We're going to put a finer point on it together. And 3, she might have an opportunity that could be interesting, but that's not the first reason they're calling me. They're calling me because we're going to chat through the broader market, how to navigate it. And then you're getting proprietary access to candidates who have mentors and otherwise out there. Maybe they haven't called yet, who are going to hire them in an instant if they know that they're on the market. And so with back channel referencing, you have to be careful when you have proprietary access to a candidate, and you have to know when that moment is. You have to also be doing like pre-back channel referencing. So for example, at any given moment, I know who the top talent is at various different companies because I'm talking to leaders and I'm saying like, who are the stars right now? So at Google Cloud, I know for 100% certainty who the top AI salesperson is there right now. And I'm constantly doing that so that when I do get proprietary access, 1, I can prioritize those relationships. And 2, I'm not blowing up their spot where their boss is just going to come in 3 jobs ago and say like, hey, I heard you're talking to Amber and I want to hire you instead. And then boom, there goes your proprietary access and your client no longer is able to hire that person.
I love the lens on the reference until you stop learning.
Yeah.
So like what's like the median number of references that you're back channeling on a candidate?
I'm usually back channeling somewhere between like 5 to 8. So it's a
That's
lot.
a ton.
But here's the other thing. I'm big on trust. And if the person's going to know, you're back channel referencing them. So I'm telling them, I'm saying like, hey, I just want you to know I'm going to be making some calls. Is there anything I need to be sensitive about? So that they're not calling me angry saying like, hey, dude, why did you call that person about me? So there's no secrets. It's happening, but I am leveraging my network. I'm leveraging our team collectively to make sure that we're back channeling candidates really comprehensively.
And then when you present that information to a CEO that you're working with, how do you do that in a way that's like tactful and structured?
It really depends on who's involved, right? Like if I'm working with a CEO or co-founder who I have a really high degree of trust with, who I've worked with for many years, I'll give them a call and I'll say like, hey, I just got a back channel reference. Here it is. We need to move quickly. I think this person's amazing. Here are the 3 other people I'm going to talk to right now, but let's not wait. I could put together a document for you, but you know, you're not going to look at it. So I'm just telling you right now, we need to move quickly. Other times where there's multiple stakeholders involved, which most of the searches that we work on do have a multitude of different stakeholders involved. We're creating a document where we're tracking everything. We're creating a document where we're saying like, okay, this keeps coming up. We need to dig into this thing. Let's keep digging into this and asking it in different ways to understand. And then we're presenting that forward to the teams that we're working with on like a very need to know basis. Not everybody gets access to that document. It's a very need to know basis because look, the reality is that somebody will, if you go deep enough, you're going to get somebody who doesn't like the person that you're putting forth. 100% of the time, there's going to be a negative back channel reference. But how do you contextualize what that means for you and the broader story?
What I can tell you is I am one of those people, and I know it for sure. Somebody once told me that with spiky people, like they tend to like have people who absolutely love them and loathe them. And so like when that comes up, right? So like I like, you know, for me, it's like there's 4 people in my head right now who I know would come up for if you were to like talk to those people about me. And so say it comes up, right? You end up talking to insert person's name who's like burned into my skull right now. And they're like, Nolan, I hated working with Nolan. Like he was a terrible partner with me. I didn't think he was effective, right? You're telling the CEO that information. Do you tell the candidate about that information? Like, how do you like try, like, how do you think about that piece?
It comes down to trust, right? So like, we don't tell the candidate because we don't want to tell the candidate. We don't tell the candidate because I don't want the next person I back channel reference with to be like, dude, I told you that in confidence.
Yeah, but can you do it in an anonymous way? Because like in my mind, the reason I would, or try to at least, is given that spiky people have love and loathe. So what I would ask, and I guess maybe you do it beforehand, which is like, hey, I'm going to start this process,
Yeah.
right? What are people going to say who don't like you? And that's, I think, probably what you do versus like the way I was thinking about it was like, we talked to a person and they said a couple of like really negative things about you, right? So I actually think you're like covering your bases on the front end. Is that right?
I'm covering my bases on the front end and I'm asking exactly to your point, like what's going to come up? Something's coming up. Tell me what it is. What is it?
Yeah,
Talk
exactly.
it through. So I'm definitely getting to the bottom of what's going to come up on the front end. And secondly, if it's a theme, so for example, if something comes up and I hear it a few times over, I may be like, hey, man, I'm going to be really honest with you. Something's come up a few times. I'm not going to say where it's come up from, but like, this is something you're going to need to, we're not moving forward with my client. And this is something that's come up. I'm happy to help you work through it, but it's definitely come up and you gain respect in that way from candidates, like gain respect and trust that you were bold enough to come and say like, hey, not anything specific, but there is a theme that is coming up that you might want to think through as you embark on this journey.
So say we make a hire, right? Your job is done, right? Like you're done interacting with the company. What do you do?
No, definitely not done, especially right now. So I think what's happening more broadly in market is that people are selling so aggressively right now, candidates to take jobs, and they're taking the jobs and they're like, they get in and the wool's pulled over their eyes, or they feel like the wool has been pulled over their eyes. And then they get there and they're like, what record stop? What is this? This is a mess. I didn't sign up for this. And then they quit and then they take it off their LinkedIn and you never hear about it again. That doesn't happen with us. And this is for two reasons. One, it's the contextualizing on the front end and being really honest about what the job is and what the job is not. That is so freaking important. So if you think about pre-sales and post-sales, the pre-sales portion tees up an effective post-sales part of the job. So first of all, you understand cultural wiring. What are you trying to solve for? Secondly, you understand what the job is. What is somebody coming in to exactly do? And you're sharing that, giving lots of context along the way. You're not burying the lead. You're not putting rose-colored glasses on
or the skeletons. Yeah.
The hair. Everything has hair, but like, what's the hair you're comfortable with?
I love that.
Then the person gets in. And I think there's something that happens for everybody. I don't know. It's a natural human reaction. When you're immersed in a new group of people, the cultural ramp in order to immerse yourself within that group is 6 months. It takes 6 months to get really comfortable and to do your best work. Ideally, you've done a lot of that like pre-relationship building on the front end, but when you're in seat, it's going to take you 6 months. So first, I do a lot of education with the clients that we're working with and say like, it's going to take 6 months for this person to start doing their best work. And here's some ways in which we can shortcut it. 2, setting the expectation with the candidate. And 3, especially if you're working with a candidate who is stepping into an executive job for the first time, you need to create the relationship with the board before they start. And create the connective tissue that one, you tell a board member, hey, this person's doing this job for the first time. That means at their first board meeting, it's going to be their first board meeting. And they're going to need grace and support from you in that first board meeting. And they're going to need you to help them set the tone for what a good board meeting looks like, in addition to the CEO. But like, we've got to manage all stakeholders involved to be able to say, this is a ramp. Especially in this moment where people want step up candidates, it also means they're stepping into an executive job for the first time. We're doing a lot of coaching with candidates as they get ramped up and saying like, hey, how's it going? And they're really sharing with us. Here's the good, here's the ugly. And we're saying like, okay, here's how you might have a conversation internally with the CEO about these things, and serving as that mentor 6 months minimum post starting the job. So we're pretty intensive about the post sales piece, because at the end of the day, like that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where your hires stick. If you can get past the 6 months, like your hires, will stick for a long time, but it has to be a healthy 6 months.
The looping in the board thing is such a good idea, because, when you're dealing with executives, what I quickly learned is that the CEO typically has a confidant on the board who they're telling everything to. Because the last thing the CEO wants to do is surprise the board, with a middle of the night execution of a C-level executive, right? It's like, well, how'd we get here? Like, because that's the first question from the board is like, that's a surprise. Why am I surprised? And, the higher you get into these roles, the more you realize that actually like this is a game of no surprises. And so like by prepping with the board, what you're able to do is like build the relationship there such that like if you, Amber, don't hear anything, but insert board member name does, then if they have a relationship, the board member is more likely to try and bridge the gap and try and make that thing work and get to like, because humans suck at giving constructive feedback. We're just terrible at it. If you think your CEO's good at it, or like, I hate to break it to you, they're probably not. And it's not the CEO's fault. It's just a human thing. We suck at it. And so typically having an intermediary, like to be able to bridge the gap between two parties, because oftentimes we're talking past each other, oftentimes we're not being direct with each other, whatever it is, at that level, getting the board, that's like such a great way to actually leverage the board, because candidly, they don't really actually do shit. Like they're just like being told information at a meeting, and this is a much better use of their time, which is like making sure the interpersonal dynamics of the executive and the CEO are working well.
Exactly. And I think to your point around doing the pre-work to move the rocks out of the way communication wise, I'll have candidates come to me and they'll just be like, I just like really feel like I'm not going to have a seat at the table. Like, here are some of the things that I wanted to ask. I'm like, well, did you ask that? And they'll be like, no, I didn't. I'll be like, well, get your game face on and see if you do have a seat at the table. Go sit down and like sit down with the board and the CEO. And are you able to say that? How does that message land when you say it? You want to say it anyway. Like, let's do it. Let's actually see if that communication cadence can be there. So a lot of that work is done on the front end and pushing the collaborative conversation and seeing where the misses are, see if you can bridge the gap on the misses. And if you can't bridge the gap, that's not a good fit and we should move on.
Totally. Amber, this was gold. Where can people find you?
People can find us at aperturepartners.co. You can follow me on LinkedIn, but we're a small shop and we're based out here in the Bay Area.
Sick. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. This is awesome.